Well, all right, Brian Weed, I Hit the Pass is now live, and we have already had a bunch of folks talk to us about the mammoth piece that you put together about the simulation of the 2015 NBA Finals. A lot of people could have done a pretty ordinary job of doing this, but you, my friend, went above and beyond in making this thing as realistic as possible and then capturing as much of it as possible. When I first saw it, and I'm not saying this because it's on the site. I'm saying this
You
because
should, though. You should say that anyway.
That's a good point. When I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is epic. So to set the stage, on hitthepass.com, one of our big launch day items was simulating the 2015 NBA Finals and capturing every single game, key moments, all the statistics, going through the whole thing. How did this start, right? I mean, just before we get into the mechanics of how you put it together, where did this originate?
Yeah, I made the mistake of deciding I wanted to do this, and then and then about 10 hours into it thinking maybe I shouldn't have. No, I've been kind of interested in the simulations, and less so like the simulations that the companies put out, the PR pieces they put out where they just hit a button and simulate it and tell you the results. Yes. I wanted to see how it played out because I think whether it's true or not, I think something different happens when you're actually watching the games and you get to see the way momentum changes and you get to see who steps up in big moments. Yeah. It's totally different than just reading a box score at the end. So this is something I had done recently also for Sporting News, which I matched up the 85-86 Celtics against the 95-96 Bulls. And I thought that was pretty compelling, and that ended in a sweep, which surprised me. But it really just as a timely thing for the NBA Finals, part of the reason we launched today was because the NBA Finals start tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure to get this in on time and make it relevant for people to read before things actually start happening. And then we can revisit it afterwards and see how close it actually matched up to what happens in real life.
You know, I've long been a fan of the NBA 2K series. I'm a huge fan of NBA 2K15. I love it. But, man, when you look at what happens in this series as you simulate it, like when you literally look at what happens on the court, it's kind of amazing how realistic some of this stuff is. What I love about the piece is you've got the NBA Finals logo on the floor, right? Oh, yeah. You weren't just playing a random, team up game or whatever. And you've also got the rosters right. Like, for example, there's no Kevin Love, and you have the minutes set to the rotations as they are entering the real NBA Finals. So talk to me a little bit about how you made that happen too.
Yeah, so first of all, NBA 2K15 doesn't have a playoff mode. So in order to get to a place where you have that finals presentation in a 7-game series, I used the My League mode, which was a new addition to the NBA 2K series this year. And it's really a customizable type mode with a lot of different options. Now, again, it's not a playoff mode, so I had to get these two teams to the finals unobstructed by the rest of the teams in the league. And I actually did it with the Warriors finishing with the 1 seed and the Cavs finishing with the 2 seed.
Yeah, and by the way, I want to interrupt you there. That's another key thing is because you had the Warriors with game 1 and 2 at home, and then 6 and 7 at home, the Cavs 2, 3, and 4 in Cleveland.
It took me a few times, a few different simulations and a few different mixing of changes that I made during the regular season to get them to where they needed to be. But once I got them in and then through the playoffs into the finals, I was ready to go. And the rotations were true to life. All the injuries were reflected. The only thing, I did adjust the minutes a little bit based on what the players have been playing in the playoffs to this date. So I might have upped Steph Curry from like 39 minutes to 40 minutes. That's not even a real example, but that's just to give you an idea of what I was doing with the players. And then also Kyrie Irving, instead of 40 minutes a game, I made sure he was set to something more like 32 and 33 because of the various ailments he's facing and the minutes that he had played in previous series, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. That was pretty much where he was topping out in those series. Now he's had like 7 days of rest, plus he didn't play in a few of those games against the Hawks. but I just wanted to kind of find a middle spot for him where he'd still be influential on the games, and he turned out to be very influential on the games. But I didn't want him playing into 40 minutes because there's no way he's going to do that. So I looked at all those type of details just to make sure that the right players would be on the court at the right times, and that they'd be playing about the number of minutes that they should in real life.
So that's just the setup. You haven't even started playing the series yet. Yeah. So you go through all that to get the Warriors as the home, the top seed, and the Cavaliers, and then you play the games. Give me the mechanics. How do you play the games, capture the video, follow it, what's going on, note the important stuff, create the GIFs that embed? I mean, that's a whole thing going on there.
First of all, I didn't play the games, and that's not what I think you meant, Rich, but it was CPU versus CPU in all these games. So I was sitting there watching the games play out. I watched every minute of every game, and this is pretty much over a 3-day period, so my head started getting foggy by the end. And I started hoping for a certain team to close it out a little earlier, but so I would sit there and watch, and I would take notes. And then along with my notes of what was happening at certain points and observations I was making based on individual player performances or the way the teams were playing, things like that. And then I'd jot down next to it certain points, like timestamps of highlights I wanted to grab later. So I captured this all with my capture software, which is an Elgato. And then I would, after the games, I would start to write down little summaries for each thing that was happening during each quarter. And then I'd go in and I'd cut out the highlight that I wanted. And then I'd process that and then upload it to the GIF site. And then I'd have to plug those in on the website along with the text. So it was and I estimate probably about 2.5 hours of stuff per game, from just the beginning of the game and watching to the end of actually polishing it and putting it into article form there and rolling it out on the site.
Well, I found it captivating, not just because of the fact that I've never seen anything like this before, but because it was a great series with a lot of very interesting developments. We won't spoil any of those here, but a lot of interesting developments, a lot of things that you would think, yes, that should have happened, and a few things that you're like, wow, that I wouldn't have expected that, but in the context of what's going on and in championship series, sometimes players who aren't known for doing certain things will do certain things, right? So a lot of that stuff, and one of the things that I had fun doing was at the end of every game, I did like a 2 or 3 sentence sort of my take where I watched what happened and then just gave a little bit of commentary, which was a lot of fun to do that. And I made the comments before knowing what happened in each game afterwards, because I wanted to be surprised as everybody else too. So I guess, just to put a cap on this, I mean, kudos to you, Brian Weedai, for doing that. I've never seen anything like that done before, but also, let's be frank, right? Kudos to NBA 2K15 for making it possible for these things to happen as well. Granted, you had to do a lot of work to get there, but the game is good enough to where you watch this stuff and you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that's some real basketball stuff going on the court.
Yeah, the various observations. I mean, I would look at the team stats after each game and I'd identify okay, right there, second chance points. That was the difference in the game. Or fast break points. The Warriors didn't have enough in this game. It was stuff like that. Or free throws. All the different categories. In the series, most of the time, those categories were fairly even. But when you saw one of them leaning towards one team over the other, usually that was who ended up winning the game. So I thought that was an interesting, again, it's really accurate to life in terms of reflecting how important various statistical categories are, like fast break points. That was a big one to me, and second chance points, obviously, because I'd watch these games and you'd see how it could be a struggle sometimes in the half-court offense. So getting those second chance, especially guys like Andrew Bogut and Tristan Thompson, pulling down the board and then going back up and scoring, huge. And then easy buckets on the break, huge. So those always played into what the final result ended up being. And then certain players, performing up to what you thought they would, and then others who maybe kind of disappeared, surprisingly, or struggled. It was interesting to see how that played out, and there were trends. It didn't seem random. It seemed like trends. So I was impressed with that.
Well, it's already generating a lot of conversation, and it's a pretty awesome thing to look at. So check it out. It's we simulate the 2015 NBA Finals with NBA 2K15 on hitthepass.com. Good time, and thanks again, Brian Weedeye, for going way above and beyond what anybody else would have or could have done. Great job, a lot of fun. And by the way, can you get the Stanley Cup Finals done by this time tomorrow?
No.
Okay.